Hey everyone, James here, bringing you another Italian genre film review. Today going to be talking about, I guess it'd be an Italian crime film from the same era, poliziotteschi if you will. The Case Is Closed, Forget It, 1971, completing the box set, tackling the middle film in here now. And this one definitely stands out versus the other two. So this is part of the Radiant Cosa Nostra box set. I actually watched this film on the Aero player. But the film looks great, and I would highly recommend anyone interested would check out this film. I'm going to be talking about spoilers here like I do every time, so only if you're interested in kind of hearing a little bit more about the nitty-gritty and what I find to be particularly compelling and interesting about this film would it make sense to watch this review. And this is an interesting one. Originally when I saw this was part of the Cosa Nostra box set, I was like, I'd seen all three films before. And this is one of those films that, sometimes is included in Eurocrime films, sometimes it's not. So depending on who is doing the classification, someone will, and, others won't. And it's different from How to Kill a Judge, as well as The Day of the Owl, because it's not Sicilian set, it's set in a prison, and it's just a very, very different setting, even though you kind of have the same director-star combination in there. It's not as overtly about the mafia and things like that. But I've really come around, especially on the second viewing of this film, which I really, really enjoyed, by the way, might be my favorite of the three films, is that it's not only a terrific film, but it tackles a lot of the same institutional corruption. Granted, the institutions are slightly different, but it kind of shows you how the mob, as well as the government forces, are sort of in cahoots to work towards these certain outcomes, and they'll work together if the powers are strong enough. And so in that sense, it's a very dark film, but it's also very clearly and concisely told by Damiani. He's one of those guys that always has a message to say, and he's pretty good about getting that across. Anyway, so not always covered in the sort of poliziotteschi genre. It's notably not included in the Roberto Curti Italian crime filmography book. Nonetheless, I have seen it on a good number of lists, so I did see it then. It's less about people doing crime on the outside for sure. This one, similar to a lot of the other films in this box set, has under 1,000 views on Letterboxd, something that should definitely be rectified because I think this is definitely worthy of being seen more. Okay, so quickly, a synopsis. An architect is erroneously tossed in prison, and his attempts to make his life comfortable complicate the situation, leaving him embroiled in internal prison drama. Should and why to watch this film? Yes, in my opinion, definitely worth watching. I'd recommend this to just about anybody. It's a really bleak film that both captures the Italian prison, it's always engaging, and has a lot to say. In my opinion, this might actually be the tightest of the three. I would pick it by a hair's margin over the other two in terms of just picks, like ratings or whatever. So I like the film quite a good deal. And I think in particular it stands out in kind of look and feel, specifically creating this prison. And it's it's just a really, really great set. It looks great. Radiant Films did a great job restoring it as well. The cinematography was done by Claudio Ragona, who worked with Damiani, also in Confessions of a Police Captain, his other kind of great Italian poliziotteschi that is not covered in this box set. And it's just a really, really great prison drama. They do a great job of just kind of making you feel trapped in there. But there are moments when they go outside into like the courtyard and things like that, and then it gets really, really bright. So even though it's all in this kind of one setting, the lighting and the choices being made are very, very dynamic. And Damiani is often undersold, in my opinion, as kind of like more of, maybe more of a literary director or more of someone that doesn't necessarily have the beautiful, striking visuals of some of the other Italian genre directors. And it's certainly true that he's no Argento or Bava, but the man was a painter, and he knows how to shoot stuff. So while it might be a little more ingrained in the picture and subtle, he definitely has a good eye, and I think the prison is incredibly well captured. They do a good job with kind of more of the sets to the prison riot, and the different dynamics and the way things are shot, I think, are really, really good. This material was based off a novel, but according to a lot of the reports, it was very much adapted and changed quite a bit. So not based off of a super famous book like The Day of the Owl. So just a little bit different. And the film really is about the corruption of the system and how you're basically forced to play into its game. So even though Franco Nero is a man of resources in this film, the corruption and things are everywhere, and it's only a matter of time before he gets out. There's never any question of his innocence or anything like that. Nevertheless, he still has to play the game, and he ultimately gets very much corrupted by the different influences and systems around it. And like a lot of these films, it's very, very bleak in the sense that these institutions are too powerful for anyone, even someone like Nero, to really overcome. So it's an insurmountable thing. Felipe Furtado, in his review on Letterboxd, does a good job of kind of showing that, or he signifies as like Nero stands out because he stands out amongst a lot of faces and people that might quote unquote belong there. In other words, he's a very atypical criminal, and he doesn't seem like he would belong there. And absolutely correct. And I think Damiani's casting of Nero here is really smart. Not only is a big star, it's a very different role than all of the other Nero roles that Damiani casts him in, but he just does seem very, very out of place, even though he's not necessarily like a weak sauce person or super slight or anything like that. Like, this is Nero, I think still in his 20s at this point, so he's a very handsome guy, but also kind of can take care of himself, so to speak, but he belongs in sort of a different class. So the last scene of the film, we finally see him outside of the prison, and we kind of see him in more of his natural element. So it's really interesting to see that dynamic. And it's very interesting that Damiani included that scene of him outside, not at the beginning, but kind of at the end. Supposedly, in casting a lot of the prison people, he used a lot of extras that were actually inmates and things like that. There's also a lot of different Italian genre actors that you'll recognize. You have people that are favorites, like John Steiner. You also have Claudio Nicastro, who plays the Mafia Don. Really good casting. I think this is my favorite Claudio Nicastro role. I looked him up, and I was surprised that he only had 22 credits, but of course I've seen well over half of them, so I swore I could have seen him in a good number of films. And so, to one other person that I think is maybe the other crucial casting that he did here, is he cast Riccardo Cucciolla, who is another man out of place. The casting here is very unusual as well, and I really like how they use him here. And he's interestingly cast in a number of films. A couple other ones is Baba's Rabid Dogs, as well as No, the Case is Happily Resolved, which is one of the films that the title I always get mixed up with this one. And so he is cast here as sort of like the other guy that doesn't seem like he totally belongs here. And I think it's really well told the way that we eventually get to learn more and more about his story. And we eventually learn that it's based off of like this big architectural thing, which is related to Nero's profession in here as an architect, where there was like a big accident and sort of assigning the blame. And so he's someone that blames the kind of higher institution. So as a result, he kind of gets tossed in here. And it's supposedly based off of a real-life incident, I believe in France. So really interesting that kind of Damiani stored that in sort of his memory bank and brought it out almost a decade later. So like a lot of the films, it is a slow burn and just really, really builds. There's some great suspense at the end. This is not a set-piece based film, but everything is really well staged. It has great use of lighting, even though the sets are very, very kind of static. You can't really like move around too much in the prison, and it's just very, very suffocating. So I think it's the tightest of the three. The last thing I wanted to highlight too is there's a couple things. I like how the warden is basically played off as the most buffoonish character of them. He's basically like a publicity man, talking about how Italian prisons might have a bad reputation, but actually they're really, really great. And then he goes and mixes up Vanzi Nero's name. He's like, "Oh, you didn't look like a murderer. Sorry about that." So he's not really like, while he's not necessarily like the big like sniveling villain or something like that, a lot of the corruption stuff takes place under the watch of people that are more buffoons than are like kind of twirling mustache people, if you know what I mean. I like how the film concludes too, where we come with Nero finally getting out, but basically kind of losing a lot of his ethics and stuff in the meantime, and he blames kind of the head prison guard, holds him in contempt, and the prison guard kind of astutely says, "Actually, you're just holding me in contempt, even though you're just as guilty as I am, because you see me as kind of beneath him." And in my opinion, it's really, really well written. I'm not sure if that was something that was in the original book or Damiani did. I'm inclined to think that it's something that was written later. But yeah, and then he finds out, he knows he's being used, but in the end his kind of friends play him off as like a tough guy. It's like, oh yeah, you're so cool for being in prison and things like that. And it's interesting because it feels like a very, very real dynamic, very well thought out. So really really enjoy how that was kind of explored. Okay, so who won the film? Gonna give it to Damiani here. Just really, really great work. Yeah, he's quickly, it's been really a joy to rewatch some of his films. There's a lot more to say in them. They're not like films that I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to fire up the cases closed, forget it. But I've really come to appreciate them more, and I think there's something that I will need to revisit at some point. So who knows? I've been kind of on the fence of buying the Cosa Nostra box set for a while. Maybe I'll go ahead and buy it just to have access of these films for a while. They're still very underseen. I imagine they'll continue to be underseen, but I do highly recommend people do watch those films. Gonna be kind of doing a more Damiani rewatch, especially of some of the films not featured here. The Radiant Films also released Goodbye and Amen, which I did buy recently. So I've really wanted to bring that film back on as well. Double feature. I was trying to think of another prison film, or maybe the case is happily resolved, but it's a pretty different movie. But in the end, I settled on Confessions of the Police Captain, released the same year, I believe, as this, or it's certainly the same time period. A very different side of Nero 2, and I think maybe the best Damiani Polizioteschi. At least I put it right up there with I Am Afraid. So both just really, really great films. So I would pair those two together. Rating? 8 out of 10. Really, really solid film, and I would highly recommend it. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time.